Look at your skin right now. Whatever shade it is, that color has a story behind it. A story that stretches back hundreds of thousands of years, crosses entire continents, and involves some of the most brutal survival pressures our species has ever faced. And the most fascinating part is that this story isn't finished. It's still being written inside every human body walking the planet today. So, how did we get here? How did a species that started out universally dark-skinned end up with this entire spectrum of human complexions? The answer involves vitamin D, folate, ancient farmers, ice ages, and a star 93 million miles away that has been quietly running our biology since the beginning. Let's start at the very beginning. Around 300,000 years ago, when Homo sapiens first appeared in Africa, every single member of our species had dark skin. Not most people, not the majority, every person. There was no variation. There were no lighter populations hiding somewhere else on the planet. Dark skin was the universal baseline of the entire human species. And that makes complete sense when you understand what skin is actually doing. Most people think of skin as packaging, the bag your body came in. But skin is your largest organ, and one of its most important jobs is protecting you from ultraviolet radiation. UV light is constantly streaming down from the sun, and it is genuinely dangerous. It breaks chemical bonds, damages DNA, causes mutations in your cells, and if those mutations accumulate over time in the wrong places, they become cancer. Specifically, melanoma, which is one of the most aggressive cancers that exists. The pigment that gives skin its color is called melanin, and melanin is essentially a biological sunscreen, a built-in UV filter that never turns off. The more melanin your skin contains, the darker it appears, and the better it blocks UV radiation from penetrating into the deeper tissue layers where your DNA lives. In equatorial Africa, sitting directly under some of the most intense UV radiation on the entire planet, this was not optional. Dark skin was survival. But here is something most people never hear about. UV radiation doesn't just threaten your skin cells, it also destroys something inside your bloodstream, called folate. Folate is a form of vitamin B9, and it does critical biological maintenance work throughout your body. Most importantly, it is absolutely essential for healthy fetal development. In the first few weeks of pregnancy, sometimes before a woman even knows she is pregnant, folate is required for the neural tube to close properly. The neural tube becomes the brain and spinal cord. Without enough folate, the consequences are catastrophic. Neural tube defects, severe developmental abnormalities, miscarriage. So when UV radiation penetrates the skin and destroys folate in the bloodstream, it doesn't just threaten the individual, it threatens reproduction itself. Women with less melanin, living under intense African sun with no clothing or shelter, experienced higher rates of folate destruction, which meant higher rates of failed pregnancies and developmental defects in their children. Now you have two completely separate reasons why dark skin was non-negotiable in Africa. Melanin protected DNA from cancer-causing UV damage. Melanin protected folate, preserving reproductive success. Two independent threats, one biological solution. Evolution locked dark skin in hard and fast. So then why did it change? Between 70,000 and 100,000 years ago, groups of Homo sapiens began migrating out of Africa. Not in one dramatic wave. It was slow, generational movement. A group travels slightly further than their parents did. Their children go further still. Over thousands of years, humans spread through the Middle East, into Europe, across Asia, eventually reaching the Americas. And as they moved north, their relationship with the sun changed completely. At higher latitudes, sunlight hits Earth at a lower angle. It travels through more atmosphere before reaching the surface. UV radiation gets filtered out. Winters are long and dark. Overcast skies are common for months at a time. The UV environment in northern Europe or northern Asia is almost unrecognizable compared to equatorial Africa. And suddenly, dark skin became a problem. Not because of cancer. Cancer risk at northern latitudes with weak UV was far lower. Not because of folate, less UV meant less folate destruction. The problem was something entirely different. Something called vitamin D. Your skin synthesizes vitamin D when UVB radiation hits a compound called 7-dehydrocholesterol. Just beneath the surface, your body literally uses sunlight as a raw material to manufacture this essential molecule. And vitamin D is not something you can simply go without. It regulates calcium and phosphorus absorption in the gut. Without it, Calcium doesn't get absorbed properly, regardless of how much you consume. Without calcium, bones don't mineralize correctly. In children, severe vitamin D deficiency causes rickets. Bones soften and deform. Legs bow outward. Growth is stunted. In women, deficiency causes a condition called osteomalacia, which softens the pelvic bones. Softened, deformed pelvic bones make childbirth extraordinarily dangerous, sometimes impossible. Women with severe vitamin D deficiency died in labor at dramatically higher rates. Beyond the skeleton, vitamin D deficiency impairs immune function, weakens muscles, affects cardiovascular health, and research links chronic deficiency to depression and cognitive decline. When vitamin D runs out, the body begins failing across multiple systems at once. Now, put a dark-skinned person in Northern Europe 40,000 years ago. Their melanin is doing exactly what it evolved to do, blocking UV radiation efficiently. But in that gray, low-light northern environment, that same melanin is blocking the very UV they desperately need to synthesize vitamin D. The skin cannot distinguish between dangerous UV it should block and useful UV it needs. It just blocks. Vitamin D production collapses, bones weaken, children develop rickets, women die giving birth, the population starts shrinking. Evolution, that endlessly patient and completely merciless process, started selecting against dark skin at northern latitudes. Random mutations that reduced melanin production began appearing. Instead of being eliminated, they spread. Individuals with slightly lighter skin made slightly more vitamin D, had slightly healthier bones, survived slightly better, and had slightly more children who survived. Generation after generation. Slightly lighter, slightly lighter, slightly lighter. Over thousands of years, the average skin tone of northern populations shifted. Not because anyone chose it, not because of culture or preference, because in that specific environment, at that specific latitude, lighter skin kept more people alive. For a long time, scientists assumed this depigmentation happened gradually over hundreds of thousands of years, a slow, steady drift as populations moved north. Then ancient DNA analysis completely overturned that assumption. The most striking example is a specimen called Cheddar Man, who lived in what is now Britain approximately 10,000 years ago. When researchers analyzed his ancient DNA in 2018, they found he likely had dark to medium dark skin, dark curly hair, and blue eyes. He had been living at northern latitudes for thousands of years, and yet his skin was still significantly dark. The extremely pale skin we associate with northwestern Europeans today appears to have spread widely only in the last 6,000 to 8,000 years. In the full 300,000-year history of our species, that is less than 3% of our existence. So what happened 6,000 to 8,000 years ago that suddenly accelerated everything so dramatically? The Neolithic Revolution, the shift from hunting and gathering to farming. Hunter-gatherers ate a varied diet, rich in vitamin D, fatty fish like salmon and mackerel, organ meats like liver and kidney, shellfish, animal products that are among the richest natural sources of vitamin D that exist. When humans transitioned to agriculture, that diet disappeared. Farming populations ate primarily cereals, wheat, barley, oats, rye, carbohydrates. Their dietary vitamin D intake didn't just drop, it collapsed. Populations that had previously survived on a combination of sun-synthesized and diet-sourced vitamin D were now almost entirely dependent on whatever their skin could produce from sunlight. And if their skin still contained significant melanin, that wasn't enough. The selective pressure for lighter skin suddenly intensified dramatically. There was a second factor that made the change happen faster. Farming communities were large, dense, and sedentary. Population size matters enormously for how quickly a beneficial mutation can spread through a gene pool. In a small hunter-gatherer band of 50 people, a useful mutation might take thousands of years to reach neighboring groups. In a farming village of hundreds, connected to networks of other farming villages, a beneficial mutation can spread through thousands of descendants within just a few generations. The combination of dietary vitamin D collapse and dense farming populations essentially hit the fast-forward button on depigmentation. Within a few thousand years, a process that had been slowly nudging skin tones lighter for tens of thousands of years suddenly became rapid and dramatic. Here is something that surprises almost everyone. Skin color is not controlled by a single gene. There is no simple dark gene and light gene. Skin pigmentation is a polygenic trait, meaning dozens of different genes work together to determine how much melanin is produced, what type of melanin is made, how it is distributed in skin cells, and how skin responds to UV exposure over time. What makes this genuinely remarkable is that different populations that independently evolved lighter skin did not use the same genes to accomplish it. East Asians and Europeans both have significantly lighter skin than equatorial Africans, but the genetic variants responsible for lighter skin in East Asians are largely different from the variants responsible in Europeans. They arrived at similar outcomes through completely different molecular pathways. This is called convergent evolution, the same adaptive solution discovered independently through different genetic routes by separate populations on separate continents. When evolution keeps reinventing the same answer from scratch, that is about as clear a signal as biology ever sends. The pressure was real, it was consistent, and it was powerful enough to find the same solution multiple times over. And here is the perspective that ties all of this together. Skin color, the characteristic that has shaped so much of human history, driven political systems, justified atrocities, and sorted people into hierarchies for centuries, is at its biological core a UV calibration system. It is a dial, an adjustment mechanism, your body's ancestral estimate of how much UV protection your distant ancestors needed, given the latitude they lived at, the diet they ate, and the sun they lived under. Light skin is not superior in any absolute sense. In equatorial environments, it is actively dangerous. More UV penetration means more DNA damage, more cancer risk, more folate destruction. Dark skin is not primitive or less evolved. It is the original configuration, the baseline from which everything else is a modification. If anything, lighter skin is the newer version, the adaptation. Dark skin is the default. Every shade of human skin you have ever seen is the result of an ancient, ongoing negotiation between our biology and our environment. A negotiation that started in Africa 300,000 years ago and has never actually stopped. The human species is still adapting, still changing, still being shaped by the same forces that built us in the first place. Your skin color is not a category. It is a chapter in one of the longest survival stories ever told.